Okay, this is an attempt to do two things. One is to check out OBS as a tool for recording what I'm looking at on the internet and what I'm thinking about it. And the other is the actual purpose of that, which is my attempts to figure out what wood turning is, particularly in the UK, but at certain points I seem to draw a blank on the UK and end up looking at the US. But that's because I'm in the early stages of trying to figure out what wood turning is. I started with a search of contemporary wood turning. Don't have that book, Nick Arnold. But it's techniques and projects. A lot of wood turning books are about techniques and projects. Clearly a lot of people are trying to learn. There's a lot of techniques to learn, and one way of learning, apart from the actual technical skills, is having projects to work on in order to learn the skills. But I'm less interested in either of those than what you see when you look for wood turning, contemporary wood turning in particular. So I look through a set of images like this, and it seems to go from fairly functional kind of decorative things, slightly decorative carvings into the surface, through just stuff like these two here, which I guess are fairly arty kind of products. I can't help but feel are influenced by what's been called postmodern ceramics, and written about quite extensively. So, you know, you end up sort of looking around and seeing all kinds of different things, which is exactly what you expect in a Google search for contemporary ceramics. And I guess the only particular sort of sense of direction that I've managed to create for myself in my mind, there's a few categories of wood turning that seem important to me. One of them, this is a wood turning club. I just found it. I don't even know where Murfield is. But it's hobby wood turning. It seems to me quite a lot of people get into wood turning as a hobby, and particularly in or towards in retirement, but not necessarily. A group of young people learning. And of course it's a really satisfying thing to do and a very healthy thing to do. Healthy in terms of sort of mental well-being, I suppose, and thinking. And it's fair to say, I think, that hobby wood turners end up making all kinds of things. Any other categories that I might try and identify, those work which might fall into those categories is made by hobbyists. And it's an important category, perhaps the most important socially, in that so many people seem to be involved in it. I bumped into one of the marketing people at Axminster Tools last year, and he described Axminster's demographic as target demographic as being retired men. And if you wander around Axminster, you do tend to see quite a few people who might fall into that category. I don't know if they do or not. So hobbyist wood turners. Another category which interests me is professional wood turners. This guy, if I just roll back a little bit, seems, I mean, I don't know who he is, Woodturner21 on YouTube, there's a video here, I've seen other of his videos, in which he has a spindle turner and turns multiple spindles copying by hand. he has a disclaimer at the beginning of some of his videos in which he says that it's not an instructional video, that you wouldn't necessarily want to use the methods that he's using, and in certain passages you can see why he writes that, because in a less trained hand they're potentially very dangerous, which of course all woodturning is, I suppose. The way he's using that skew chisel, it's not an unfamiliar tool to him. Tremendous skill. So this is a category of professional wood turning, spindle turning. I should have narrowed this down a little bit. I should have stopped that as well. It's fantastic to watch. He's done that before. So I wouldn't really want my hand in there. To have a look at the end to compare with the model he's working from. So it's not just the skill of making, it's the skill of making precisely that is so astonishing, I think. Now I pulled up a few of these pieces. There's another category of professional wood turning. Angus Klein. At some point I'm going to have to get a new computer, I can tell. This iMac keeps losing its links for no particular reason that I know of. In which we have again incredibly skilled craftsmanship, but to a very different end. Here making vessels, and they're vessels that this is the gallery, I was already in it. See, we can't move around. Quite a lot of woodturners' websites aren't very easy to use, in which the turned object is much more art oriented. You can see clearly that there is a bowl at the centre of many of these pieces, but it's not a bowl in the or vessel in the traditional sense that you'd put anything. Certainly never a liquid. Obviously, it comes straight out of the holes. Could put flowers in such a thing, but really, the bowl is the vessel is the end in itself, I think. And so we move around the internet looking at lots and lots of variations among these kind of makers, between what's pretty much decorative pieces, I suppose that's what I'm thinking of with gold leaf. You could put things in it, but you're unlikely to want to. And next to it, a lamp made from a yew root ball. And so this kind of category of maker working commercially presumably is trying to fill different parts of the market, different audiences, different potential customers or clients. Beech tree designs where designs become, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I guess all of this is just my opinion, quite fiddly. I think a lot of woodturners don't quite know what to make, or don't have a particular style. You get a sense of a certain kind of colour scheme here, but they hop around between things and don't have a particular direction. But some lovely pieces. You can see why these would sell. So then there's two, so we've had an amateur or hobbyist wood turning. We've had a traditional practical spindle turner, and we've seen a few examples of turners who are making functional and non-functional bowls and vessels for, I suppose, different audiences, ranging from those who are looking for functional items through to those looking for decorative items. So I consider those two to be kind of closely related, commercial wood turning. And then the final category would be, to my mind, let's have a look. I look at vessels quite a lot, bowls. David Ellsworth, who is making fairly functional pieces relative to some others, but who is also pushing the limits of that. I mean, you would struggle to put much into this vessel and get it back out easily. Beautiful pieces of turning. And they're works that become quite sculptural. He's not afraid of including the pith at the centre of the tree in his works. Fairly abstract colour elements added to the surface. So, as I say, some very sculptural pieces that Ellsworth produced. Fabulous to look at, intriguing to imagine how they were made and the kind of skill that went into the making of them. Another is Mark Lindquist. Both Ellsworth and Lindquist are Americans, and doing some fairly kind of extreme turning. I'm not sure where that link goes, nowhere it seems. Oh no, it did go somewhere, to more of these columns, totemic columns. So yeah, very sculptural, carving into the surface with various tools. And you can see the scale of his turning as well is extraordinary. Both Ellsworth and Lindquist were influenced by this man, apparently, alongside him, Peter Volkus, who made some extraordinary ceramic pots. And when you look at the work of Lindquist and you look at Volkus next to them, you can see an aesthetic which ties them together. I think, anyway. When I was a ceramics student, I remember being intrigued that he got his students to make, I can't remember if they were two-minute teapots or if I got my minutes wrong, but the speed of making, of throwing, was part of the work, because by doing it quickly you couldn't spend too long worrying about finish and so on. And I was quite a bit after this when I was a student, but being really impressed with that. And so with Lindquist's work, you can see the influence of that way of working, a kind of abstract expressionist way of working, insofar as that term could apply to ceramics or to wood turning. So yeah, those are the categories that I've managed to isolate. Hobby wood turning, spindle commercial work, commercial vessels and decorative pieces, and then certainly Lindquist, I'd say, is working as a fine artist in the conventional sense, making sculptures and so on. There may be other categories, but I haven't found them yet. That will be enough for today. At some point I hope to develop it.